What's up, dudes? This is Ideas of Ice and Fire, and I've got with me Don the Kraken Wit, a genius of A Song of Ice and Fire. He did a reading of the Forsaken chapter on his channel, and I've also got one on my channel. Check both of those out. Today we're going to be discussing the Forsaken chapter from the Winds of Winter. Don, take it away.
Well, I'm really happy to be here, and I'm really happy that you actually asked me to do this. I think it's widely accepted that this is one of the greatest chapters that George has ever written. It's very prolific, it has tons of foreshadowing, and towards the end, it actually has a lot to do with previous prophecies that we've had in the series so far. And I'm just really excited to discuss it.
So this chapter starts off with Aaron Damp Hair chained to a wall, and someone commented earlier on one of my videos that this is maybe how George R. R. Martin feels about the series at this point. He's chained to it and he doesn't want to do it anymore. I don't know if that's necessarily true, but this is right after the King's Moot, and it's basically Aaron telling his story of what's happened up until the point where he is now, where he's like chained in this dungeon. And eventually, Euron comes in. Now, if you don't know, Euron has been sailing everywhere. He's like basically a big bad pirate dude. He's been all around the world, and he's quite fond of drinking Shade of the Evening, which is the drink of warlocks. Now, Don, I know you have something to say about that.
So once we get the conversation in between Aaron and Euron, he forces the Shade of the Evening down his throat, and we get a vision from Aaron, and the first thing that he actually sees is Yuri. And I believe this is kind of a subconscious thought of his, maybe something that he regrets over time, or maybe he had such a relationship with him that it's always been in the back of his mind. And with this extremely hallucinogenic drug that he's given, he sees Yuri. And while Euron is staring him in the face, he starts laughing. And Aaron kind of snaps out of it and suddenly realizes that he's not looking at Yuri anymore. He's looking at Aaron. Or he's
Yo,
looking at Euron.
yeah, yeah.
And Euron, within Aaron's own visions, is sitting on a throne of skulls, or death and destruction, which I think that this will play a little bit more into what Aaron's overall goals are, how they have nothing to do with anybody else. He's a man of his own. He's a man of his own guidance. He's sailed the seven seas. He's a master pirate. He's a man of his own agenda. He does what he wants. But speaking about this, hallucinogenic drug, I think that it's more of a manipulation than anything else. I think that if you plant an idea in someone's head, then they will start to hallucinate what you want, or start to have the visions of what you want. And an example here is when Aaron sees him on the Mound of Skulls, he says, "Look again, brother. See where I am seated." And all of a sudden, in Aaron's mind, he now sees his brother sitting on the Iron Throne.
Mm-hmm.
So it's very manipulative. It's very persuasive. And I think maybe a little bit later that will come into fruition. And then if you want to talk about it, Euron is also known to drink the Shade of the Evening himself.
Yes.
So is it possible that somebody had planted these ideas into his head for him to develop his own means, like for him to want to take over the Seven Kingdoms, for him to want to go on this path of destruction? Is this his idea, or is it somebody else's?
It's a very interesting idea because, as you said, he has sailed pretty much everywhere to like Valyria, possibly Ashai. I mean, he's encountered all types of strange individuals, possibly, and yeah, it's neat that you mentioned that because the same thing happens to Dany in the House of the Undying. She just kind of sees what they want her to see. They're trying to scare her in certain places, and they're trying to freak her out to get her to kind of like get trapped there. So yeah, it's kind of a manipulation thing.
The wine of the warlocks,
The wine of the warlocks.
sweeter than your seawater, with more truth in it than all of the gods of earth.
Yeah, it's basically some strange, weird hallucinogenic drug. It's made from the bark of these weird black trees that grows in the house of the Undying in Karth. So, and I don't, do we know if these trees actually grow anywhere else? Because I know they say they're found in the house of the Undying in Karth, because that's where the warlock lives. And we also learn later in the chapter that he actually has a couple warlocks with him because he's collecting priests for some reason. But we'll get into that in a little while.
Right off the top of my head, I think there was a mention in it in the World of Ice and Fire, but I can't remember right off the top of my head where the origin was of those. Like I know where it's harvested now, just like you said, but I'm not necessarily sure where it came from.
Another thing that Euron admits to Aeron, I think, as a way of like kind of taunting him, is that he admits that he killed their brother Harlan, Robin, and Balon, which most people already knew, anyways. And he kind of just says this to taunt Aeron. He says that I killed them, and then I went out into the sea and I prayed, and basically nothing happened. He's basically trying to get the point across to Aeron that you're a drowned god is a lie. He's not going to save you. You're going to be chained here, and you're going to die when I want you to die.
Your God will come for you tonight. Some God, at least. This man is not a believer of anything. He is a man that believes fully in himself. He has a godlike complex. He has a king-like complex. Like everyone is there to serve him, which I'm pretty sure we all know somebody like that in our own lives. But that's neither here nor there. And I just think it's really interesting that, which you did bring up the warlocks that we'll talk about a little bit later, but I mean, speaking about the Shade of the Evening and, when Euron wakes up and gets taken to this chamber of these warlocks that have been just completely mauled and desecrated. Like you have one that's with no legs hanging from the ceiling.
Yeah.
Their tongues have been ripped out. And you brought up a good idea. It's like he has all of these holy men with holy blood. What is he doing? Like, what is he sacrificing to sail all the seas, to go to Valyria, come back, probably been there again, went to Ashai, which it kind of counteracts itself or contradicts itself to say that he's not a godly man, any god. So what is he doing with all of these warlocks? What is he doing with, Aaron being the most holy priest of the drowned god, period? And I think that's a question that we have speculations, but I don't think we have a definitive answer. And I think that's something to really look forward to in a When's a Winner.
Well, what I suspect, but I like you said, we don't have definitive answers. I suspect that there are forces in this world, not necessarily gods, but wills that impose themselves upon people. I mean, I feel like the same thing is happening with Melisandre's situation. I feel like what she's seeing in the fire isn't necessarily from a god; it's from some entity, perhaps some abstract force that's imposing its will upon her and making her see something. I feel like the same thing is going on with Euron. Maybe he's under the influence of something. He's collecting these priests for a reason. He ties them to the prows of his ships. Like, to me, it seems like he needs them. I mean, if he didn't believe in a higher force, then why the heck does he need holy blood? It seems to be a contradiction here.
The bleeding star bespoke the end, he said to Aaron. These are the last days, when the world shall be broken and remade. A new god shall be born from the graves and charnel pits. Quinn, is he talking about himself?
I feel like he may be talking about himself. Because, like throughout the entire chapter, he says to Aaron, he says, pray to me. He says, serve me. Like, me. And he sees himself on the throne. All the other gods are dead, and he's the only other god, except he's not himself. To me, what I saw, he's kind of got like a squid head going on. He says he's like born of a kraken of the deep. He totally looked like Cthulhu from
Mm-hmm.
Lovecraftian mythology to me, who is one of the great old ones, a god that sleeps under the sea, dead, dreaming. So, yeah, he totally wants to be a god. He has a god complex. He wants to be worshipped, basically.
And here's another one. Kneel, brother. The
Hmm.
gods I commanded. I am your king. I am your god.
Yes,
Worship me, and I will raise you up to be my priest.
exactly.
Like, oh, Aaron, or Euron, you have all the power in the world.
Exactly. So maybe he's taking these priests, maybe he's going to do something with them and turn them into his servants some type of way. I'm not entirely sure because if you look at these priests, they're all servants of like kind of different gods. You've got like he's got like some septons from the seven. He's got warlocks. He's got Aaron who serves the drowned god. So they're not like all the same. They don't all believe in the same god either.
Absolutely, and even the gods that Aaron saw in his visions, like you even brought the butterfly god of Nath,
Mm-hmm.
like so basically we're covering all the bases here. We're
Mm-hmm.
talking about the big gods and religions all throughout, Westeros and uh, the free cities, all of these massive gods, and then we're
Mm-hmm.
even going to talk about the butterfly god of Neith.
Right.
It's covering from the top all the way down to the bottom.
Mm-hmm.
So what Aaron is seeing, Euron is basically stomping out every single one of them
Mm-hmm.
to prove a point that Euron Greyjoy is literally going to be one of the greatest forces that we've had in this entire series.
Yeah, like all these gods that we think are so important, like the Lord of Light. He's the Lord of Light is there too, dead.
Mm-hmm.
So he's like,
Dead.
even the Lord of Light is finished. Like he's nothing to me. Like compared to what I'm about to do, the Lord of Light is nothing.
Mm.
So yeah, it's definitely interesting. He's definitely got kind of a large ego thing going on.
The dreams were even worse the second time. He saw the long ships of the Ironborn adrift and burning on a boiling, blood-red sea. He saw his brother on the Iron Throne again, but Euron was no longer human. He seemed more squid than man, a monster fathered by a kraken of the deep, his face a mass of withering tentacles. But beside him stood a shadow in woman's form, long and tall and terrible, her hands alive with pale white fire. Dwarfs capered for their amusement, male and female, naked and misshapen, locked in carnal embrace, biting and tearing at each other as Euron and his mates laughed and laughed and laughed. So, before we talk about the dwarves capering in their amusement, this woman here, this shadow figure, which we hear the word shadow, and a lot of things come to mind.
Mm-hmm.
A shy talking about being shrouded in shadows. We talk about Quaithe, who's shrouded in mystery. You brought up a good idea, and I completely agreed with you. Anytime we talk about a lot of mystery, there's a lot of things that go to Quaithe. Like
Mm-hmm.
she's just stuck in mystery. She's shrouded in mystery. Other than her, is there anything that possibly came to mind about who could this be? Which for me, the only other person of significance I can think of is Daenerys,
Yes.
and I know that's a typical answer that probably, everybody wants to stray away from, but the white fire, like
Yeah.
I just think about her white hair, like the way that she looks,
Mm-hmm.
and maybe, this has something to do with a little bit of her, House of the Undying prophecy, which we're actually going to talk about towards the end of this discussion with the priest and everything. But the main relation I had was Daenerys, being blood and fire, and her having the fire properties, and then I
Mm-hmm.
also have to think about the physical description of Daenerys herself.
Mm-hmm.
With the white hair and the white fire. So white hair, Targaryens, blood and fire, white fire. That's the only relation that I had. So what do you think about that?
Yeah, Daenerys can totally be seen as like kind of white fire. She's Targaryen and white hair. Also came to my mind was Melisandre maybe, but I don't really see how Melisandre could possibly work into this. But I feel like the person who this woman is, I feel like she may be a Shadowbinder or something. Quaithe or Daenerys. I honestly, I could see it being Daenerys. I really could, because a lot of people have this idea that maybe Dany is not necessarily going to be the savior, and that the story's going to do like kind of a like 180, and that she's going to be on like the wrong side of, if there is a wrong side. Well, Euron is about as wrong as the side can get. but but yeah, I could definitely see Dany. I could see Quaithe, and even a little bit Melisandre, or perhaps even it might be someone that we don't know. But I can't. I don't know if George R. R. Martin would introduce an entirely like new figure, like, kind of this late in the game. But maybe.
Why not?
I
I mean,
mean,
like
yeah, he
he
could.
does it every single chapter that we get,
Yeah.
you know. And one thing that I just kind of realized, possibly about introducing a new character. Do you know what one of Makoro's nicknames is?
What?
The Black Flame.
Okay. Yeah. Yeah. Okay, that makes sense.
All right, so is it too far-fetched to say that maybe there is a new character that gets introduced? Maybe somebody that fills the characteristics of, this woman, and also possibly being of, the Red God of R'hllor.
Mm-hmm.
Maybe, maybe.
Okay, yeah, yeah. I could see it as like maybe like a shadow binder. That's also got something to do with the lore. Yeah, definitely. Because like as we said, like Euron has been everywhere. He's
Yeah.
been to Shai. He's been to Valyria. He could have met all types of people,
Mm-hmm.
like all types of people. Like Euron has a fucking dragon horn. For
No,
Christ's
he
sake.
he doesn't.
Well, he doesn't. Victarion has
Victorian
it,
does.
but
And
Euron found it.
yeah, speaking about, Victorian and Euron and this white flame
Hmm.
or white fire and the black flame, it just makes sense, because this whole series is about yin and yang.
Hmm.
It's a song of ice and fire, of
Yes.
love and hate, of about a balance in the world. And when magic arises, that's when dragons show up, or is it vice versa? So you talk about Victorian, now going against, Euron's rule. He has the horn. He's no longer listening to him, and you know, Euron being the big bad, and he does have the black flame. Or why would it not be too far fetched to have Euron now have the white fire?
Hmm.
It's
Yeah.
just kind of a balance mechanism, if you want to think about it that way. It's all just a giant brain teaser,
Yeah.
and we're just here to kind of shoot the shit and, and try to
Yeah.
figure it out.
There's nowhere near enough information for us to figure out who the hell this woman is.
Right.
Like she's just like when I read that I was like, who the heck is that? Who the freak could that be? But the dwarves though, I have a kind of an interesting idea about what that means. It says that
Okay.
they're naked and misshapen in carnal embrace, biting and tearing at each other as Euron and his mate laughed and laughed and laughed. What that said to me is that there'll be two opposing forces fighting while Euron and whoever this woman is are kind of pulling the strings and like laughing, like look at these pointless people fighting while they're off doing what needs to be doing and essentially like taking over everything. That's kind of what that says to me.
And dwarves capered in their amusement,
Mm-hmm.
male and female, naked and misshapen. So male and female, we literally have two opposing forces here.
Mm-hmm.
And naked and misshapen, that means that you are just literally out there. You are exposed and you're broken on top of it.
Mm-hmm.
So I completely agree with you. Like I think about what's going on in the Seven Kingdoms,
Yeah.
how it's just completely in turmoil,
Mm-hmm.
and they're going to sit back. Now they're going to be pulling a lot of strings here, but in essence, they are going to sit back and let the Seven Kingdoms burn and
Mm-hmm.
fight each other and be locked in carnal embrace.
Mm-hmm.
And they are literally going to pick up the pieces and be on top of it when everything falls.
Yep, these are the days when the world shall be broken and remade. Yeah, totally. And a new
Absolutely.
god shall be born from the charnel pits. That's
Guess what?
Euron.
That's Euron.
Exactly.
Absolutely.
Mm-hmm.
It's like I know everybody has had a special feeling about Ramsey this entire time,
Uh-huh.
and it probably got a lot worse even when people were watching the show, and we got to see a lot of things that might or might not necessarily happen in the books, so it just
Mm-hmm.
further perpetuated how much you hated this man, but I think when everything is said and done, or at least by the ends of a Winds of Winter, you're going to have a new hatred in your life.
Oh
And
yeah.
his name is going to be Euron Greyjoy.
Like reading this chapter, I already kind of hate Euron. But like,
Well, I was fascinated, but yeah, at the end of the day, I'm like, you
like
bastard.
it really, like, because beforehand you get the kind of sense that he's like kind of a scheming, like asshole. But in this chapter, you really see that this guy is like seriously evil.
Hmm.
Like he's just like unremorsefully evil. But back to the dwarves, like that kind of reminded me of something from A Clash of Kings, like Daenerys in the House of the Undying. She sees something that's kind of similar. She sees five dwarves on top of a naked woman's body, and they're kind of like biting at her and they're raping
Yeah,
her. Like
yeah,
I always kind of felt that the woman was Westeros, and then the dwarves were the five kings. Kind of like ripping apart Westeros.
right.
Uh, um, but yeah, that's just like the imagery is a little bit similar.
So, in what you're saying here is that when it all becomes said and done, in the Seven Kingdoms, we're only going to have two major players,
Mm-hmm. Oh,
instead of five.
mm-hmm. That makes sense.
So yeah, you could completely start theory crafting on who or what, when, and where,
Mm-hmm.
these two major forces are going to be, and I don't want to say like the South as in, Dorne,
Mm-hmm.
but I can definitely say that one of the major players is going to be the North.
Mm-hmm.
Because I mean, we all know the North remembers and winter is coming.
There, there's certainly going to be a lot of death. Like we see.
Or you could also think about it this way. It's
Uh
going to be
huh.
the entire Seven Kingdoms, Westeros, or
Yeah.
what's left of it versus the White
Something. Oh
Walkers.
yeah. And then Euron is even above them, perhaps
Right,
some type of way.
right.
I don't even know. But yeah, yeah. Like again, this chapter does demonstrate really how evil, like seriously, seriously evil this dude is. Like he's a child molester, first of all,
Ugh.
which is like when I read that, I was kind of just like, oh my god, what the fuck, the
You know
fuck.
what? I went out and bought a can of WD-40 and I started like lubing up all the hinges in my house for all of my doors
Oh
because like
god,
I don't want that sound
the
going on in
rusted
my house.
hinge.
Yeah, I don't want that at
Yeah,
all. Like
it.
I wake up freaking out.
Yeah. Yeah, and it's kind of sick. It's really sick how Euron taunts Aeron about it. He's like I heard you praying. Were you praying that I choose you? And he's just taunting him about it with like absolutely no remorse. And now you really understand why Aeron hates Euron even more so because freaking raped him as a kid. But yeah, and then yeah,
And it also sounded like he wasn't the only one.
yeah, yeah. He says, "Were you praying that I would choose you, or that I'd pass you by?" You know what I'm
Mm.
saying? Yeah,
Hmm.
exactly. Aaron also dreams about drowning. So, and he says it's not the bliss that would follow in the drowned god's watery halls, but he dreams about like drowning, like and it's like painful and he's like full of fear. So like maybe that's like you said, the shade of the evening. You're like open up to suggestion. Maybe that's like Euron trying to push it on him that there is no god. When you drown, you're just gonna drown, and that's just it.
Well, the fear,
Mm-hmm.
of dying in nothingness,
Mm-hmm.
is something to be feared, and I don't want to get into a modern day in our, world of religion, but I think that there's been a lot of arguments throughout time that religion was founded upon the idea that like you don't want to be alone. You're
Mm-hmm.
afraid of death,
Mm-hmm.
and like I said, I don't want to, counteract anybody's religion. It's pretty much a free world, around here. You can worship your big toe if you want,
Mm-hmm.
but the idea of dying and it being nothing and blackness and no thought, like, and just you can't even fathom actually not thinking.
Okay.
You know, it's kind of like space. You can't even fathom that. The fact, guess what? It goes on forever.
Yeah. I mean, I it when you sleep and you don't dream, you go into oblivion. You know what I'm saying? There's just nothing. Like
Right.
you don't remember that you are alive. You don't remember your life. You're just in oblivion. And I kind of in the show, not so much in the books, two characters that have been brought back to life, Jon Snow and Beric Dondarrion, both said that they saw nothing, nothing after death.
That's
Like,
scary.
yeah,
That's scary. Like,
yeah,
you can't even fathom how scary that is.
yeah. So then that begs the question: then what are these so-called gods? What is Melisandre really seeing when she looks into the flames? Like it's, I personally think there's something, an entity. There's an entity, not necessarily a god, that's influencing that.
It's like it's more of an angel or a demon
Mm-hmm.
opposed to God or the devil.
Yeah.
You know, it's more of a, a power,
Mm-hmm.
than an actual deity.
Yes, exactly. Yeah, like George R. R. Martin even says that no gods will ever appear on screen. That doesn't like exclude. That doesn't mean that something else isn't pretending to be a god, which I definitely think something is. Several things maybe. Because I tend to have this thought that in Melisandre's religion, that R'hllor and the Great Other are real. They're just not actually gods. They're like kind of abstract forces that kind of oppose each other. Like even in Lovecraftian lore, which Martin like borrows heavily from, like the gods don't really care about people. They're just kind of playing. They're not actually gods either. They're just like super intelligent beings. They're just kind of playing with people. They're using people in their own little games. So like you're completely inconsequential. Your life does not matter, and that's the whole point of cosmic horror. Like people don't matter in the grand scheme of everything. You know?
And I don't think you're too far-fetched with saying this, because we are talking about a low-end fantasy novel here. Like there's not dwarves and goblins and orcs running around. However, there are dragons and little green children that are one with the earth running around, and white walkers that raise people back from the dead.
But it's all so believable because of the way Martin writes it. Like
Right.
a dragon just seems like an animal in this world. It's
Well,
totally believable.
and there's also different forms of dragons in the story as well, like
Hmm.
the worms and the wyverns,
Oh
like
yeah,
just basically wingless dragons
fire
running around.
worms.
Yeah, so it's like, hey, guess what? In certain parts of this world, there's still dinosaurs
Hmm.
running around.
Yeah,
They're not extinct yet. And
and
then,
then
hey, don't even get me started on Suthoros.
hmm
You know what I'm saying?
a lot
Like
of weird shit.
that's like Skull Island from King Kong.
Yeah, totally. And then there's talk of like mermaids, which I totally think are real in this world. The deep ones, obviously.
And the deep ones, just like you said, it's a direct quote
Lovecraft.
from Lovecraft.
Hmm.
The fishmen,
Hmm.
and then we started talking about the oily black stone, like it was there when the Iron Islands were founded. You
Hmm.
know what I'm saying? Like there's a giant maze over there in the other part of the world that's made out of nothing but this black stone that's occupied only by giant spiders.
Hmm.
You know,
Yeah,
I
like
mean, come
Toad
on.
Isle. It's a big black stone made out of
Yeah, it's a
yeah,
big toad made out of this oily black stone.
worshipped by fish people.
Yeah.
Like that's not even a joke.
Yeah,
Like
that's real.
yeah. So yeah, and then ice dragons are possibly a thing. Like that's not 100%, but there are rumors of ice dragons in like the Shivering Sea and stuff like that.
You know what? I think we there's not too much to talk about. Torvald Browntooth, except for the fact that he's almost as vile as Euron himself. With these people that are willing to eat dinner when Aaron gets brought up, from the dungeons, that they have these corpses hanging from the halls, like there's some kind of flags or trophies, and we we wanted to bring up the idea that, it's like, hey, guess what? The old way has been brought back way more than Balon ever could,
Like
but they just instead cranked it up to 11.
it's in overdrive at this point.
Yeah, yeah.
These people are like, "See, you do not want to hang out with these people. You do
Right,
not want to hang
no,
out with these
you
people."
don't. You don't. And if you see their cells, like Euron said, I make men pray. I'm the more godly man than you've ever met. So It's kind of time to talk about no wonder why Euron is mad. He's been to Valyria,
Mm-hmm.
and we know that we have the dragon horn, which he doesn't have anymore. Victorian has it, but what about him moving around in this Valyrian steel armor, like he's wearing nothing? Like
Mm-hmm.
we know that this steel is not as heavy as other steel, so like you can really, like if you're swinging a Valyrian steel sword, it doesn't
Mm-hmm.
weigh as much as a normal sword,
Yeah.
but it's like 1,000 times stronger.
Yeah.
What about him actually, head to toe in Valyrian steel armor? Like that's extremely intimidating.
Yeah. Um, well, he got it from Valyria. I mean, he had to because
Hmm.
like Aaron says, like this armor may have been around like 400 years ago, but even then, the cost of this shit would cost a kingdom. So I feel like he went to Valyria and found this armor somewhere. Perhaps there are even, I mean, this is kind of a little bit crackpot, but I kind of think that there might be beings that live in Valyria. Someone that lives there.
You know what? I don't see him coming across like a full plate armor in Valerian steel that he just found.
Mm-hmm.
You know what? So, like, I want to piggyback off of your idea that there's still inhabitants there. What if he actually, through his adventures
Mm-hmm.
and endeavors, actually had this armor crafted for himself
Mm-hmm.
with the runes on it, like with the in my mind, it's like with all these different plates, it has runes and words and like spells
Spells, yeah.
woven into his armor. And
Mm-hmm.
it was made for him. It was created for him. He has these people under his power.
Mm-hmm.
That's just a fun thought for me.
Yeah, because he is very, very, very persuasive, isn't he? Like
Hmm.
almost more persuasive than he should be. Like
Yeah,
he's
like he talks about the guys, like when he comes back during the King's move, like he gives them all these treasures of jewels and just all this money and just like a good pirate should,
mm-hmm.
and like what does he take for himself? He doesn't take a whole lot.
Yeah.
Like he takes the power, he takes their allegiance,
Yeah.
he basically manipulates them and takes their will away from them.
Takes their tongues.
Right.
So like you can't even speak.
Well, that's just kind of his prisoners and or the people that row his ship. I think if he's trying to win favor of everybody, I don't think he necessarily cuts their tongues
No,
out.
no, no. Yeah, yeah, yeah. He cuts out. I always thought that he maybe cut out their tongues so they couldn't say where he's been. Or maybe, I mean, but if they knew how to write, they could maybe write it down. But how many of these people really know how to write? So,
Yeah, they're all mutes and
yeah.
freaks.
Mm-hmm.
He's got monsters from all over the world
Yeah.
that is his crew members. Like I think about, and this is totally not true, but like what comes to mind is like the mates of uh Davy Jones
Uh-huh.
in Pirates of the
Oh,
Caribbean.
yeah. Yeah.
Like just thinking about all these freaks and like sea creatures and stuff like that. And, Davy Jones was kind of when we were talking about earlier, the dream that Aaron had,
Mm-hmm.
that was just kind of a visual for me.
Yes.
When he was half man, half kraken,
Absolutely.
I was like, wow, like my mind just ran wild.
Dude, that's so cool. Yeah, it's totally like Davy Jones.
Yeah.
I mean, I'm not going to get into this a lot, but I think that I am still like really sad that I won't get to see this Euron in Game of Thrones because he's like a cool pirate dude. You know what I'm saying? And then the Euron in the actual show is just like some guy, that
Yeah.
just looks like everybody else.
Yeah.
But
He doesn't even have an eye patch for crying
yeah,
out
I mean,
loud.
come on. I wanted to see a cool
Yeah.
costume. I fucking love costumes, and like this dude is just plain, so plain. But yeah, whatever.
What about the vision that Danny has about a dead corpse riding on a prow?
Uh huh.
How does that make you feel after finishing this chapter about these holy men and these holy blood? And Euron tells, his fleet to
Tie them to the prow.
take and pick whichever one you want.
Mm-hmm.
However, you tie my brother up to the silence.
So does that mean that Euron is coming to Danny, perhaps?
Um, Possibly, but I think that he's a little bit more focused on Westeros
Hmm.
at the moment. But you did propose the idea that he had these holy men and holy blood to actually sail the seas of Valyria,
Yeah.
because we know that Valyria is like you got to be a badass to even like go there.
Yeah.
You know,
Even
or
get near
even
it.
sail the sea, even get near it. Yeah. So like, what's he doing? Is he actually using these men for purpose? Is he actually sacrificing? And it's all just a giant contradiction, and we're
Hmm.
not gonna know until we actually, get the books in our hands.
I mean, I feel like if these entities, like I think exist in the world, like these kind of Lovecraftian type entities exist, then sacrifice to them, whatever they are, might do something. You know what I'm saying? Because like sacrifice, it it kind of works. Like we've seen. I mean, we don't know for sure. It's always kind of vague. But like every time someone is sacrificed, it seems to lead to something for the
Something
most part.
happens.
Yeah,
Yeah.
something does happen. So I don't know.
And sacrifice is definitely such a thing. What about the demon tree? That we know about. What's his name? Egg.
Yig or egg, whatever. How?
Yig.
Yeah.
Yig. But like we know about that history. We have Bran traveling back in time, witnessing actual sacrifices over a weirwood.
Yeah.
And it's a real thing. And
Hmm.
we have examples of Stannis sacrificing.
Hmm.
The Red God of Valor. Hell, that's the only way you can do anything is if you sacrifice them.
Sacrifice
You
blood.
know, blood. So you have these holy men with holy blood of all of these different gods. It's like, and then we talked about it earlier with these manipulative hallucinogenic drug that Euron loves to drink. Who is influencing this man?
Hmm.
And I do want to give a little shout out to James Bichelle. He did a great video. He's a fellow Hypes Watch member. He's got a lot of interesting ideas about this as well. Like who is he actually serving?
Hmm.
And is it gonna turn out to be Euron has his own agenda or he's working for someone else?
Yeah.
It's so fun to think about.
It
It's
is.
so fun to think about.
And also the thing about just like magic in this world is that it doesn't necessarily have to be intrinsic on whether or not a god exists. What if, like James Johnson, this is actually his idea. Magic could just be like a force in their world, like gravity or like the strong nuclear force. It's just there. And if you know what to do to access it, then that's just what you have to do.
It's
Whether or
like a
not a
mag
god is. Yeah, exactly.
it's like a magnet.
Hmm.
It's like, guess what? That's just, metals that we know that if we treat it this way, this will happen.
Exactly. So it doesn't necessarily have to be a god. Euron can just know if I do this, if I sacrifice this person in that way, then it'll lead to this effect. You know?
It's physics.
Yeah, it's physics, not magic.
It's physics, not magic. Come
Yeah.
on.
Totally. All right, I think we've covered the most interesting bits of this chapter. Don, you want to say something before we go?
Yes, sir. Absolutely. Thank you so much for having me over. This was a lot of fun to do, and just to pick apart this chapter, and that I think that's what the Song of Ice and Fire is all about: is theories and theory crafting and prophecies, and just actually, giving us stuff to talk about, things that we find interesting, and we will put our Forsaken chapters in the description. And if you haven't checked that out yet, check both of them out.
Go check out Don's. It's much better than mine. He has sound effects and everything. So, yeah.
Thanks, man. But it was literally an honor to be here, and I had a lot of fun. I really appreciate it, buddy.
And no problem. And as always, dudes, make sure you like and subscribe for more ideas of Ice and Fire.